Hello all, this is Manoj Kumar Das, faculty member of economics from Ravenshaw University, Cuttack. Today, we are going to discuss one of the important topics in macroeconomics, that is the new classical macroeconomics. In today's lecture, we will discuss the evolution of the new classical macroeconomics, the new classical critique of Keynesian micro foundations, and then the features or the characteristics of new classical approach along with its policy implications. So let us start today's discussion. Now I am going to share with you the slide. Dear students, this is the scheme of the presentation. First, actually, we'll discuss the evolution of new classical macroeconomics. Then, we'll discuss the new classical attack on Keynesian theoretical foundation. That is, new classical critique of Keynesian theoretical foundation. Then, we'll move to discuss the features of new classical approach, and at last we'll discuss the policy implications of new classical approach. So after attending this lecture, the following will be the learning outcome. That means after listening this lecture, you would be able to know the transition of macroeconomic ideas from neoclassicals to Keynesian and then new classicals. Then you will also be able to know what is the new classical economics. You will also be able to know the origin of new classical economics. Then you will be able to know what are the new classical criticism of Keynesian economics. Then you will be able to know what are the basic features of classical macroeconomics. And of course, at the last, you will be able to know the policy prescription of the new classical macroeconomics. So dear students, let us move to the next slide to discuss the evolution of new classical macroeconomics. As you know, macroeconomics is prone to evolution in which new ideas and new thinking establish fresh and valid insights to the working of economic systems. So in this context, actually, to begin with, it is a well-established fact that the neoclassical school dominated the macroeconomics field until the Great Depression of the 1930s. Then neoclassicals, during that time, neoclassicals believed in the flexible price mechanism to achieve desired macroeconomic outcomes. As you all know, during the Great Depression, the unemployment rate kept rising and the neoclassical policy prescription of flexible price mechanism failed to cure the economic depression. This led to a situation of policy crisis and raised doubts on neoclassical macroeconomic approach. So then what happened? Then, as you know, James Keynes in 1936, in his publication, The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, that is popularly known as General Theory, rejected certain neoclassical assumptions and proposed an aggregate framework to explain macroeconomic behavior. It is important to note that Keynes did not propose to displace neoclassical theory. The theoretical principles of neoclassical were still true, but Keynes contended that the neoclassical theory is incomplete. So, in case of Keynesian theory, what was the basic ingredients actually? In the Keynesian theory, as you know, Keynes believed that deficit in aggregate demand is the cause of all economic misery, and by stimulating aggregate demand, we can solve the underemployment problem. So we can manage aggregate demand to solve the problem of economics. As you know, Keynesian idea had an enormous impact not on economics but also on the real world. The idea of aggregate demand was transformed to aggregate spending with focus on government spending for solving the problem of underemployment in the economy. Actually, in post-World War II, what happened? The whole world saw the widespread implementation of Keynesian economic policy, and it continued to dominate the macroeconomics field till 1970s. But the Keynesianism fell from grace during 1970s. You know what is the reason? The 1973 to 75 recession, triggered by the 1973 oil crisis, led to rising unemployment, high inflation, stagnant economic growth. So what happens? Keynesians were puzzled by the outbreak of stagflation, and Keynesian policy prescription of aggregate spending did not reduce the unemployment. It means Keynesian policy prescription of aggregate spending failed to cure the economics problem. So the new classical school emerged in 1970s as a response to the failure of Keynesian economics to explain stagflation. The leading exponents of the new classical approach are Robert Lucas, Thomas Sargent, Robert Barrow, Edward Prescott, Neil Wallace, and Robert M. Townsend. Many of these economists have won Nobel Prize in macroeconomics field for their immense contribution to the field. So neoclassical they consider the entire Keynesian revolution is a journey of a blind path. In the new classical view, the entire Keynesian revolution has been a journey of a blind path. The new classical macroeconomics completely undermine the Keynesian proposition that discretionary government policy can be used to stabilize the economy. So the new classical economists regarded Keynesian economics foundation are totally unsound, and consequently they seek to explain macroeconomic behavior within a new classical theoretical framework. So now let us try to understand what was the new classical critique of Keynesian micro foundation, then upon which this new classical idea actually evolved. So, as you know, there are several reasons why Keynesianism fell from grace during 1970s. The apparent failure of Keynesian policy prescription to explain the simultaneous rising of unemployment rate and inflation rate during 70s actually triggered debates, and economists started attacking the fundamental theoretical underpinning of Keynesian framework. The Keynesian advocacy on expansionary aggregate demand policy was vigorously challenged by many economists. So during this period, the Keynesian critics started saying that Keynesian activism are both overambitious and, more importantly, Keynesians are fundamentally flawed. So far as Keynesian economics is concerned, as you know, they used to argue that market do not clear because of failure of price adjustment mechanism. That means in the market there will be glut, there will be unemployment because of the failure of price adjustment mechanism. That is, price either adjust slowly or price adjust partially. So slow price adjustment means that market fails to clear. So this is the Keynesian economics. So they try to explain theoretically that slow price adjustment means that markets fail to clear. But critics argue that the existence of non-market clearing means that there exists potential exchange between economic agents which would be mutually advantageous for them to accept a prices different from the ruling ones in the market. So here you may note that as economics assume, rational economic agents always try to optimize their economic behavior. So in the Keynesian approach, the failure of price adjustment to bring about the potential advantageous exchanges means that economic agents are not optimizing. So it means in the Keynesian economics, what was the main proposition? In the Keynesian economics, the main propositions according to the critics was that agents do not fully optimize their economic behavior, and second, market fails to clear. So these two propositions of the Keynesians were vigorously challenged by the critics. Now the question here is, the non-optimizing economic agent means non-rational behavior of economic agents, which is thus a fundamental weakness of the Keynesian approach. So the assumption of rational economic man is a most important and powerful economic methodology. As you know, if we will not assume economic agents are not rational, then we cannot have a very pertinent theory to explain the economic behavior. So without rational assumption, economic behavior becomes totally ad hoc, and this would generate a vast number of alternative hypotheses, and it will lead to a extremely difficult situation to select the valid theory or valid explanation to economic behavior. So the rejection of rational economic man in Keynesian approach would therefore do immense harm to economics. Critics argue that in Keynesian economics, only broad aggregates were considered and are made functions of a few variables without justification of their inclusion. Investment depend on animal spirit, and this lacks any sound rational basis. So Keynesian model were characterized by ad hoc construction, which depends on non-rational expectation and rigid price system, for which rationalization was less rationalization actually offered. Further, new classicals argue that Keynesians fail to explore the full implications of endogenously formed expectation on the behavior of economic agents. New classical economists like Robert Lucas, Thomas Sargent, they argue that Keynesian model in the 1960s were fatally flawed as they lacked sound micro foundations and incorporated an adaptive expectation hypothesis which is inconsistent with maximizing behavior. In the new classical view, the entire Keynesian revolution has been a journey of a blind path. The new classical microeconomics completely undermine the Keynesian proposition that discretionary government policy can be used to stabilize the economy. So the new classical economists regarded Keynesian economics foundation are totally unsound. And the new classical economists have been motivated by a belief that Keynesian structure is fundamentally flawed. They have attacked not just the usefulness of Keynesian analysis for understanding economic events and designing full policies, but also its internal inconsistency. Consequently, new classical economists propose an alternative way to address economic questions in a theoretical framework. So, under this discussion, we have covered that how new classical economics has evolved and how they criticize Keynesian theory and propose a new theoretical framework to explain macroeconomic behavior. Now let us discuss actually what is this new classical approach and what are the main features of this new classical approach. As already discussed, during 1970s, the new classical approach to macroeconomics has been developed as the main rival to Keynesianism. So we have already mentioned the names noted particularly noted new classical macroeconomics like Robert Lucas, Thomas Sargent, Robert Barrow, Edward Prescott, Neil Wallace. These economists actually laid the foundation of new classical approach. So the new classical approach is firmly based on the assumption of rational economic man, which was not there in Keynesian theory as per the view of new classical approach. However, the main features of the new classical approach to macroeconomics are outlined by 4 important features. What are they? Economic agents optimize. 1. 2. Continuous market clearing. 3. Rational expectation hypothesis. And the 4th one, that is the most important one, the aggregate supply hypothesis. These 4 are the main features or the characteristics of new classical approach to macroeconomics. Now let us discuss these features of new classical approach to macroeconomics in more detail. First feature, that is economic agents optimize. This assumption is vital for rational economic agents assumptions, and without this any theory will be ad hoc in nature. Now the second features, that is market continuously clear. In new classical model, all markets in the economy continuously clear in the line with Wallersian tradition. What is this Wallersian tradition? Wallersian tradition is one situation where all the economic agents will have complete and full information about the economic things. So this happens due to the complete availability of information. So the new classical economists assume that all market continuously clear in the economy and prices and wages adjust instantaneously to clear markets. The economy is in a state of continuous equilibrium both in the short run as well as in the long run, where all markets clear. The new classical economics approach actually differs from Keynesians and monetarists over market clearing argument. According to Keynesians, as you know, markets may not clear due to the slow price adjustment. So the economy may remain in a state of disequilibrium because of slow price adjustment. But in the words of monetarists, as you know, monetarists assume that markets have a tendency to clear. Prices and wages are fairly flexible. Therefore, the economy may be in disequilibrium temporarily in short run and attain equilibrium in the long run. So according to monetarists, there will be disequilibrium in short run, but there will be equilibrium in long run. But Keynesians, they argue that there will be no equilibrium at all because of failure of price mechanism. But the new classical economists, they assume that market clear instantaneously, whatever may be the situation, whether short run or long run. There is no disequilibrium even in the short run. Since price and wage adjustments are almost instantaneous, all unemployment is in equilibrium. So given this aspect, actually we can say, according to new classical, whatever level of unemployment is found in the economy, it is natural rate of unemployment, or this is the voluntary unemployment. An increase in the natural level of unemployment over time is the result of reluctance of people to take jobs due to lack of incentives. So this is the third feature of new classical approach. Now the next one is the rational expectation hypothesis. Actually, as you know, this is the central tenet or nucleus of the new classical macroeconomics. This is associated with the work of John Muth in the 1961. Initially, this was developed in the context of microeconomics. As we know, the rational expectation hypothesis holds that economic agents, particularly individuals, firms, consumers, etc., they form expectation of the future values of economic variables like prices, incomes, etc. by using all the relevant economic informations available to them. So the new classical economists use rational expectation hypothesis to explain the Phillips curve in the inflation theory that we have already discussed earlier, that the Phillips curve shows the relationship or the trade-off between price level and the unemployment rate. Further to state that according to this rational expectation hypothesis, rational expectations are not based on past rates of inflation like your adaptive expectation, but rational expectation hypothesis is based on the current state of the economy and policies being followed by the government. So workers and firms base their information, or based on the information they form forecasts or expectations. So and this expectation is based on various types of government announcement also. On the basis of such current information, they predict the rate of change in different variables. Such forecasts may go wrong. However, it will be random in nature. That means if we commit any mistake, that will be random in nature. So it means errors in predictions, particularly under rational expectation hypothesis, are random, and such discrepancies between the actual and expected rate of inflation is the only random in nature. So there will be error, but those error will be random in nature. So this is the third feature of the new classical macroeconomics. Now let's move to the last one and the most important feature of the new classical macroeconomics, that is aggregate supply hypothesis. The new classical approach is significantly different from Keynesian approach, as we have already said, but it is significantly different so far as the supply side of the economy is concerned. Under Keynesian non-market clearing conditions, aggregate supply depends on the level of effective demand, as you know. But in the new classical approach, supply depends on relative prices and not on quantities. So the new classical supply hypothesis has a close relation with the Phillips relations, as we have already discussed in our earlier classes. Here the supply hypothesis is that the deviation of unemployment from its natural level depends on the difference between actual prices and expected prices. Means if the unemployment rate differs from its natural level, it will differ because of the difference between actual price and the expected price. And this particular argument can be explained with the help of one equation. And what is that equation? The equation is as follows. You look at this equation carefully. In the left hand side, we have taken the difference between natural rate of unemployment and actual rate of unemployment, which is the function of the difference between two things. What are they? One is, as you can look at, one is the actual price level or actual inflation rate, and the next one is the expected rate of inflation. So the difference between actual rate of inflation and the expected rate of inflation explain the difference between the natural rate of unemployment and the actual rate of unemployment. So this equation shows that the actual unemployment rate lies below the natural rate of unemployment by an amount which depends on the difference between actual and expected rate of inflation. So this supply relation can be alternatively expressed in terms of the deviation of actual output from its permanent or long-run equilibrium level. Why? Because we know the level of output is positively related and linked with the employment rate. So if there will be any deviation from the employment perspective, then there will also be change in the output. So this particular relationship that we have written here can also be explained in terms of the deviation in the output. And what will be the equation? This will be the equation. You look at this equation carefully. Here YT minus YPT. This YT is actual national output. YPT is nothing but the permanent output or potential output. And again, this difference depends on the difference between actual inflation rate and the expected inflation rate. So we can say the aggregate supply hypothesis is explicitly derived from a consideration of behavior of individual suppliers of goods and labor. A number of such rationalization has been offered, but the best documented one is developed by Professor Lucas in a series of papers. The new classical macroeconomics incorporates the Lucas aggregate supply hypothesis, which is based on two important assumptions. One, that is rational decisions taken by workers and firms reflect their optimizing behavior. And the second assumption is the supply of labor by workers and output by firms depend upon the relative prices. Thus, the aggregate supply hypothesis is derived from optimizing behavior of workers and firms about supply of labor and goods, which depends on relative prices only. So this is the fourth feature of the new classical approach. Now let us take a look at the complete new classical model. As already noted that the main innovation of the new classical macroeconomics as compared with Keynesian analysis is the aggregate supply function. In a new classical model, aggregate output consists of a permanent component and a cyclical component, which depends on divergence between actual and expected prices. So, a new classical model is completed by adding an aggregate demand relations, which is subject to exogenous shocks. Nominal aggregate demand is defined, as you know, as usual as a real output multiplied by the price level. A portfolio adjustment equation may be incorporated here to determine the desired holding of goods, interest-bearing financial assets, and money. These things can be added to explain how the demand of the households are determined. The aggregate demand side of the model actually does not differ from the Keynesian neoclassical synthesis as significantly as does the specification of aggregate supply. The working of new classical model can be simply illustrated with the help of one standard diagram here, and this is the standard diagram we are taking here. You look at here this diagram, the DD curves we have drawn here that represents the aggregate demand curve. Here LRAS curve is the long run supply curve, SRAS are the short run aggregate supply curves. So initially, if you look at the aggregate, look at this, the initial point is here. The initial aggregate demand curve is D0, D0, and the initial short run supply curve is SRAS0, and this aggregate demand and aggregate supply determine the equilibrium at this point with initial output YP, initial price P0. Now, let's assume that the government actually increase the aggregate demand by policy intervention through expanding the money supply. So what will happen if the money supply increase and the aggregate demand increase? This will cause shift in the aggregate demand curve from D0 to D1. Given this short run aggregate supply curve, the new equilibrium point will be here. And here what will happen? The price level will increase to P1. And the supplier or the firm, they will see that the price has increased from their expected level P0. So because the price has increased, they will try to expand the output from YP to Y1. But sooner or later, traders' expectation about the general price level will be revised. They will know that the price level, expected price level is not P0, but they will expect the price level will be P1. So when they will revise their price level, expected price level, then the short-run supply curve will shift inward, and this shift will continue till the short-run supply curve intersect the long-run aggregate supply curve at a new point, and this will be the new point where the output will go back to its original level. So as traders adjust their expectation about the general price level, the short-run supply curve shifts up to the left till output has returned to its previous level. So what is happening here actually? Here one important point may be noted. The long-run aggregate supply curve is invariant with respect to price level. So the rate of inflation that is happen here because of increase in money supply actually not changing the potential output or the long run output. It means there is no trade-off between price level and output as the case of Keynesian. So here new classicals completely undermine Keynesian theory, and according to them there will be no change in the level of output because of change in price, because the expected rate of inflation will be sooner or later adjusted over the period of time without bringing any change in output. So the government intervention in the economy will not bring any fruitful change. So this is the main aspects of the new classical theory. So what we have discussed so far, we have discussed the evolution of the new classical theory, then we have discussed the criticism of Keynesian theory, then we have discussed main features of the new classical theory and a complete new classical model. Now what we'll actually discuss, we'll discuss some of the important policy implications of the new classical model. So what are the main policy implications of the new classical model? Following are the main policy implications of the new classical model. First, the natural rate of hypothesis. Second one, policy ineffectiveness proposition. Third one is the impotency or ineffectiveness of systematic monetary policy. Then the fourth one is the importance of structural policy parameters. And the fifth one that is there is cost of inflation. So now what's about the first one? That is the natural rate of hypothesis. The new classical approach restates that natural rate of hypothesis is in a stronger form. Output only responds positively but temporarily to an increase in the current prices of goods if this increase is not regarded as completely due to rise in the general price level. That means there will be natural rate of unemployment in the economy, whatever may be the price level. And the second one, that is policy ineffectiveness proposition. The new classical macroeconomic analysis holds that with rational expectations and flexible prices, wages, monetary policy, if anticipated in advance, will have no effect on output and employment in the short run. This is in the policy ineffectiveness that happens in new classical approach. So it is only an unanticipated increase in the money supply that will affect output and employment. What's about the third one? That is impotency or ineffectiveness of systematic monetary policy. That is, according to the new classical analysis, anticipated changes in aggregate demand will have no effect on output and employment, even in the short run, by pursuing a systematic monetary policy. A systematic monetary policy is one which takes into account any known rule. That means if you follow a rule to conduct the monetary policy, this will be anticipated by economic agents, and accordingly their expectation will be fully realized, and this systematic monetary policy will not be effective. And the last one, that is the importance of structural policy parameters. So if you want to change the economic situation of the economy, then we have to bring some certain structural change. We can't depend on monetary policy or government intervention. The structure of the operation of the economy must change to reduce the unemployment rate. But if we try to manage this one with the rising inflation, then the rising inflation has its own cost. So these are the policy implications of the new classical approach. I hope you have enjoyed this lecture, and if you have any doubt, then you people can ping me through the Google Class for further clarification. And for further reading, though I do not follow any particular textbook ad verbatim, however, the book that I have followed more closely than any other one is these two, that is Modern Macroeconomics, Its Origin, Development and Current State by Brian Snowden and Howard Irvine. And the second one is that is Macroeconomics, an Introduction to Keynesian Neoclassical Controversy by R. Levasik and Alexander Redman. So thank you very much. For better future, as I used to write always this one, keep learning, keep smiling, go green, and plant tree, save water.